von Hayek, I should assume, would not agree with this, and he would say that the government is distorting the market, and of course because um, Ron Paul and Ronald Reagan both believed more strongly in von Hayek and von Mises than they did, and their critiques of Keynesian economics, and we're now in part three. Um, what's what would I do? Well, to me, as I've said, unattainable surplus is the crux on which um, and advertising is the crux on which this debate hinges. Because if people are uncertain of the future, that is why government planning needs to take place in Keynes's view. But if the price signal is strong enough, um, Hayek's view carries through, and people will change their behaviours to do this. But what if the people's view is made caused to be uncertain by the products that banks are selling, the activities of banks which are maybe offering them inducements to get loans when they don't need loans? What if the central bank is producing more money supply than is needed because it's trying to export inflation and trade its way out of recession? You know, as as we're moving away from financial services in the modern day era to exports, you could get a situation of mercantilism, and that would be very dangerous, where imports are prevented from entering an economy and exports are become the exclusive um, thing that is pushed out. Now, I'm not against exports, I'm for exports, but it must be balanced. You must have a balance of trade, and you must have balanced budgets as well. Because if people just export, people stop trading with each other, and then there will be wars between nations. So that's a problem that needs to be solved. The Federal Reserve also is a rogue central bank. It is doing monetary policy for its own interests as it trades debt with the various central banks around the world. It's making money on the margin by doing that out of American taxpayers' dollars. So I can understand Ron Paul's argument that he must get rid of the Federal Reserve. Maybe in a Keynesian argument you would need to renew regulation, because the crisis began when the housing bubble was created by the Fed by loose monetary policy and loose loan policy, which allowed more loans to be um, sent out to banks, where banks would lever out mortgages over 100 or 1,000 times without any insurance on those mortgages. So one house may have had 1,000 mortgages in effect because the debt was being moved around and traded by the different banks. Now the problem, this leads on to the problem of currencies, which is the third problem that I identify as an economic problem on which the hinge between who wins between Keynes and Hayek comes out, and that is the gold standard. Now, for a long time I was for the gold standard, but the problem with the gold standard is it's undemocratic. Economics and politics are not the same thing. Economics is a science, and to confuse the two would be a travesty. But politics and political economy is a science, and this is where the viewpoint that I'm talking from at the moment. If you have a gold standard, then all your monetary supplies is dictated to by a few people. Again, the rise of an elite, as Pareto said, which would dictate your monetary policy. In the previous years, it's been the Rothschild family, although they're just businessmen. They did not do 9/11, as all these conspiracy theorists say. The Bin Ladens did that in Saudi Arabia. But the Rothschilds controlled the money supply at the time of the Waterloo, to give an example, by having gold brokers who would fluctuate the price of gold to the interest of that particular family. And so you could have an enemy feudalist crime family in effect we take the modern case that we have an oil standard on the dollar because of the petrodollar and the link between the Saudis and the Bin Ladens to the oil supply, which means that a foreign feudalist crime family has the control over the money supply of the United States in effect. And the Fed is having to adapt. You could say the Fed is having to adapt to inflate the money supply to try and get themselves out of a problem where they're between a rock and a hard place if you're sympathetic to the Fed.